Hello and welcome to the channel. So for those of you who have been following my Power Wagon camper build, as you can see behind me here, I finally received my camper. Now this is a brand new Palomino SS-1251 made by Forest River. Now there are already a bunch of YouTube videos that show all the details and features of this particular camper, so I'm not going to go through all of that. But what I am going to do today is talk a little bit about my selection and buying process, some of the pros and cons of this particular camper, and also some of the issues that I have observed. Now, due to high demand and supply chain issues, the buying process for this camper was pretty frustrating to say the least. I had this particular make and model in mind, and supply across the country was pretty low. When I could find the camper in stock, the price was usually too high. Now, I initially put down a deposit to have a new camper built through a dealer in Idaho, but after months of waiting, the expected delivery date kept pushing out further and further, and as a result, we missed out on the entire summer camping season this year. And on top of that, the dealer wanted to increase the price from what we'd already agreed upon. So through some persistence, I finally found this particular camper in a dealer in Iowa in stock at a very reasonable price. So I canceled my order through the Idaho dealer. I bought this guy from Iowa and had it shipped here to Oregon. So ultimately it worked out okay, and it seems that supply chain issues are improving a bit, but just keep in mind if you're planning to buy an RV in the very near future, you might face some challenges. So why did I just select this model over other options? Well, I've been planning to do some off-road trips with a camper, and I wanted to minimize both my weight and also my profile off-road. So having a retractable roof allows me to achieve both of those things. Also, to add some versatility and to keep the girls happy, I was looking for a camper that had both an indoor shower and a flushing toilet. So this is basically the only model that I could find that had everything that I wanted in a camper at a very reasonable price. Okay, so let's take a quick walk through and I'll show you some of the primary features and also talk about some of the problems that I've seen. Now, besides the indoor shower I already mentioned, this model also has an outdoor shower. Now, this is pretty handy when you're at the beach and your feet are sandy. You can rinse off out here before you get inside the camper or the truck. Now, raising the roof is pretty straightforward. You have 4 brackets that hold the roof down. You just detach those and you have this little remote control that raises or lowers the roof. So when I first received the camper, I was having issues blowing the fuses that feed the roof lift motors. Now, there are a couple of issues that were contributing to that problem. The first is just lubrication. These lift arms just needed a good lubrication. I used some dry lube that's Teflon based, and that seemed to help a lot. But the other issue is inside. That's not really easy to get to, but behind this drawer here and below it sits the control system for the roof lift motors. Now, because I had blown a couple of fuses, I went ahead and replaced the standard ATC 30 amp fuses with some self-resetting fuses. And those work more like a breaker, except there's no interaction. If they happen to trip, they'll reset themselves after some time. So that really beats having to take this drawer out and trying to get it back in every time to replace a blown fuse. Now, the other contributing factor is this black water tank vent hose right here. It's a really stiff hose. And I was noticing that when I tried to drop the roof, it was coming into some resistance trying to push this hose down. Now, as a temporary solution, I just make sure I unplug this vent hose before I drop the roof. As a more permanent solution, I plan to replace this hose with something a lot more flexible. Now, another issue with this hose is that it was too short. So when I would raise the roof all the way up, the hose would actually come detached there from the roof. Now, to fix that, I just added this little adapter here I bought at the local hardware store, and that helps to lengthen the hose a bit. Now, another issue I was having when I first received the camper has to do with the base of the roof here on all 4 corners of the camper. Let me get up there and show you what I mean. So when the roof is dropped, before it closes all the way, you have to tuck this little skirt in. So when you raise the roof, the skirt may not be quite in place yet. It may be sitting back here like that. And the problem I was seeing is if it was raining when I raised the roof, I would get water immediately into the area around the corners here. So you can see when I first got the camper at the base here, this was just a big air gap, and water was dropping off from that skirt and getting right into the gap area there. Now, once the skirt is in place and covering that little hole up, it wasn't an issue, but when I first raised the roof, it was an issue. So I've fixed that. just by putting some black silicone there where that air gap was. I've done that on all four corners, and that seems to have completely resolved the problem. Okay, so I'm just inside the camper door here. It's actually starting to snow outside, so now is a good time to do a quick walkthrough of the interior. So the first thing I'll say is I'm pretty impressed with the lighting inside the camper. These little LED puck lights really throw out a lot of light without consuming much power. I'm also pretty impressed with the overall look and feel of this camper. You know, they use pretty nice fixtures throughout, and I'm pretty happy with the way this wood looks. Now back here is actually a full-size queen bed, so it's good for sleeping two full-size adults. There's a pretty good amount of storage on either side of the bed there. And above the bed is a vent with a fan. Then over here is a secondary bed. I actually have this set up for just a sitting area or a couch, but there's a piece of plywood that you can put across here and put this secondary cushion across there as well. That basically doubles the width of this area here and converts it into a bed, which is sufficient for a smaller adult or a child. And then below the bed here is just a tabletop. So there's a post underneath the storage area that would go there, and then this table sits on top of it. And then back here is one of the selling points for us. This is the 2-in-1 shower and flushing toilet. And back here are 3 drawers for storage. This is a three-way Dometic fridge, so it operates on AC, DC, or propane. I was pretty surprised by the size of this refrigerator. It's pretty large, especially when considering how small the camper is. So I think this is going to work out really well. And over here is just your standard propane 2-burner stove. Have a propane heater back here, and that actuates with this thermostat over here. Next to the heater is a tankless water heater. Also operates on propane. And then here's just a standard kitchen sink. Now there are a lot of nice little features inside the camper, like for example, there are a bunch of these little AC outlets just about everywhere you turn. There's also a nice little USB port as well, so it's pretty well thought out. So that's the interior in a nutshell. It's pretty simple, but also highly functional. Now in addition to the roof issues I mentioned before, I've also observed some build quality issues that I think relate to the fact that the manufacturers are trying to get out as many units as possible in a very short period of time to meet high demand. Now I think this is more representative of the overall RV industry as a whole right now, and not necessarily specific to this particular manufacturer. Now when I first took ownership of the camper, the very first thing I saw was a bunch of little metal shavings up here on top of the stove cover. Now I was wondering where these came from, and I think that I've located the source. There's actually a hole up here in the roof, and a socket has been installed. Now I have no idea what that socket is there for. If you know, let me know in the comments. But there is a little aluminum bar on the side of that socket, and I think the drill bit probably hit that aluminum bar and put a bunch of shavings up in the roof, and they probably just stayed there until the camper was shipped to me, and all those shavings came and fell down here onto the stovetop. Not a big issue there, but not something you necessarily want to see either. Now back here is the panel that holds the breakers and the fuses. Now back behind here I found a whole bunch of sawdust and some wood shavings as well. And I became concerned that if there were a spark back there, it would probably start a fire. So I went ahead and vacuumed that area out. Again, not a big deal, but definitely a build quality issue in my opinion. Beneath the sink here, I can get a look at the plumbing and get an idea of how quickly they may have put together this camper. If I look on the right hand side there, that hole there you can tell is really not well sealed up. I could say the same also for those hoses on the left hand side. It looks like someone was really in a hurry and was putting the sealant in quickly without really paying attention to what they were doing. Now also that white hose there in the center of the screen, that goes down to my fresh water tank, and the very first time I went to fill up that fresh water tank, that hose was actually leaking. So I found the hose clamp on the end was loose, wasn't really tightened well, and water was coming out. So I had to get in there and tighten the hose clamp. I went ahead and sealed up that hose and the other hose as well with some silicone tape just for some extra insurance. Now another couple of minor issues here is when I first got the camper, this magnet on the door here was installed down here, which means that when you open the door, it would make contact with the refrigerator. So I went ahead and raised that up and fixed that problem. But the other issue I saw was the fact that these screws that were holding in the magnet were over torqued, and was actually cracking the plastic on both sides. I went ahead and repaired that, but I'm seeing evidence of over torqued screws in several other locations on the camper. The first time I went to operate the external jack, one of the screw heads that was holding in the jack head popped right off. There's also this little threshold in the doorway, and I took that off to add some overlayment onto the floor, and also saw 2 damaged screws, which I think are all evidence of over torquing the screws. Okay, so to summarize, I've had a few issues with the camper, but overall they're relatively minor issues. And of course I could have got these issues resolved through the dealer because the camper is under warranty, but I'm really not in close proximity to a dealer. Most of the issues are pretty simple, and I was able to resolve them myself. Now, overall, I'm pretty happy with the camper. You know, it's about the right size for our family. It's not too heavy for the truck, and it wasn't too expensive. Also, I think this camper is a pretty good value when I compare it to other similarly sized campers. Now, as the weather warms up, I'll be doing some camping trips, and I'll post some updates on what worked out well, what didn't work out well, and I'll also post an update on how the truck handles this size of a camper. So if you're interested in seeing those videos, you might want to subscribe and turn on your notifications. Well, that's all I have for this video today, and as always, thank you for watching.